Snowed In at the Cottage by Catelyn Meadows. Narrated by Georgia Lee King. Chapter 1. The mountainside was blanketed with snow. The white contrast made the evergreen trees ever greener. The sky a radiant, and the snow blinding. Grace Eastland hugged her coat tighter around herself to ward off the colder than popsicles weather. The last time she'd been this cold had been during her brief stint in this Arctic temperature all the time. Then again, the winding road, the hush of the trees, and the snow's untouched beauty as it spread beneath an untarnished sky. She almost noticed the winter air in her cheeks. The heavy sound of a trunk slamming closed jarred her. Her Uber driver held her lime green suitcase toward her. "Here you go," he said. Grace rolled her gaze at him before returning her glance where it was. She peered past the parking lot filled with a few cars to the inn where she would be spending Christmas. Harper's Inn looked more like a quaint home than a hotel, with dual points on its rooftops, connected by a covered porch in the center. Multiple windows kept the white inn from blending in with the snowy landscape around it. Trees spoked along the mountainside, offering pink branches trailing behind them. Grace wondered if this scene was what made the town of West Hills, Montana, several miles out, its name. Grace breathed in the crisp, open air and the scent of snow. She tried to find a way to describe the scent. It was the kind of scent that nothing else could quite replace. It was cleansing in her lungs, rejuvenating and filling her with energy she hadn't felt in so long. Stress slipped from her ribs and down to her fingertips. She was so Jackson hated her mother's suggestion for writing research, but Grace didn't want to. Yellowstone was another option, though only accessible by snowmobiles writing. During her research, however, she came across a located at the northernmost part of the state, just below the Canadian border, was a little town overflowing with charm. West Hills, and more specifically, Harper's Inn, claimed to be America's North Pole, the perfect destination for a Christmas writing retreat. No interruptions, just seclusion to inspire her to create the perfect environment for her story. After her most recent rejection, Grace wasn't sure she could do it. She'd poured her heart and soul into that book. She'd edited, cut words, added more, and tweaked it so much that if her manuscript had been made of fabric, it would have had more stitch lines and random scraps than a patchwork quilt. Even still, she was proud of that book. How could they turn her down? Grace had been so distraught. 1 or 2 rejections had been hard enough, but she'd sent her book to over 100 agents, and every single one of them said no. It was hard not to take that personally or see it as a reflection of herself. Talking things over with her parents had helped. Mom suggested Grace start a new story. "Rejection is just an opportunity to try something else," she'd said, and then asked what would help Grace feel better. "I just want to get away," Grace had mumbled. Between the pressure at work, her frustrations, and discouragement querying her book, she'd wanted to escape. A new idea had struck that night, and when Grace proposed getting away to write it, Mom and Dad offered to give Grace her Christmas present early. Her phone released a jolly ringtone, festive and fitting of the holiday season. Grace waved goodbye to her Uber driver and swiped to answer. "Hi, Mom. Did you make it yet, sweetie?" "Just barely." "And?" Mom had suggested Jackson Hole. They were full support for writing the way. But the minute she learned Grace's timetable for the trip, Mom had immediately begun to complain about her leaving during Christmas. It was bad enough, Mom had claimed, that Grace's sister Stephanie would be unable to come home for the holiday, with Stephanie's husband being stationed in Florida. To have Grace gone too would feel too much like an empty nest. Grace did feel bad leaving her parents to celebrate alone. Still, this was the only extended break Grace had from her job at Halvick's Wellness, where they offered essential oils, whole medicine alternatives, gentle cleaning products, and the like, via phone and online. Grace had gone on plenty of writing retreats with friends, but every time she'd gotten precious little actual writing done. While fun getaways, time was usually spent chatting with her friends instead of writing. She needed some way to awaken her sleeping muse. It had to be now. Mom had said she'd understood, and with some coercion from Grace's dad, relented to Grace's time frame. "Just got to the end," Grace said. "It's beautiful here." "Are you in love?" "Absolutely. Montana and I are getting married." "I was hoping to plan a wedding this summer," Mom said. "Seriously, how is it?" "It's nice." Grace couldn't believe her heart. Not that she hadn't seen much beyond the snow-capped trees. "That's good. So you'll write what you need to and skedaddle on back home by Christmas, right?" Grace laughed. "Mom," she reprimanded. They'd gone over this. Today was Tuesday. Grace's stay was booked for a week, and Christmas Day, Friday, happened to fall right in the middle of that week. Grace was a grown woman, and Mom had to decide that sometimes her kids would "I know," Mom said. "And you know how folks do. It's just, now that you're gone, it won't be the same without you here for Christmas. Uncle Mike will be here. He'll wonder where you are." Grace loved her mom's only brother. When she was little, Uncle Mike had been as she'd grown up, he'd been fierce and tender on Mario Kart, and a shoulder to cry on. Grace hadn't seen him in a few months, but she'd weighed this fact ahead of time, and knew Uncle Mike would want her to have her trip. "He sees me on social media. You know, it really is too bad. He told me last night he's bringing his associate, that one I told you about, the one who just got divorced, Terry something." Grace pinched the bridge of her nose. Her mom's She wasn't about to call her Uber driver back and board the plane. Nor did she want to reschedule her flight and leave here at Sure, she wanted to be with her family for Christmas, but she saw them all the time as it was. This was her Christmas present, and Mom was ruining it. "I've got to get out of the road. There's another car coming." Grace lied, gazing down the absent, snowy lane the Uber driver had taken once he dropped her off. "I'll talk to you later, okay?" "I'm sure it's Get some writing done. I'll do Christmas. Bye, Mom." Grace hung up before Mom could say anything else. Work was stressful enough. It was hard to work a dead-end job at a She intended on making the best of her stories with her job, but scribbling away on napkins during lunchtime and writing on weekends wasn't cutting it. This was her chance. The idea she'd adapted for a story of a fantasy romance between a woman who could wield magic and a man who'd been raised by trees in the American wasteland was going to be a bestseller. The idea was catchy and thriving. She had the perfect tagline. Her brain was bursting with ideas and conversations, and all she needed was the time to the way it was going to She was so sure no agent had represented anything like it. If she gave the story everything she had, immersed herself in the world she hoped to create, she couldn't fail. Or at least, that was what she told herself. While Mom supported her writing, Grace knew Mom wanted her to stop living in her own head. Now that Grace had graduated from college and obtained a degree in literature that did her little good in finding a job other than the one Grace had been working at since high school, Mom thought Grace needed to find a man who could ground her in reality, help her grow up an adult, or something. But Grace didn't want reality. Not when made-up men were so much better than those in real life. Besides, she'd already moved into her own place last year. Wasn't that adult enough? Bells tinkled in the distance, and a horse-drawn sleigh jangled its way toward a quintessential red barn situated feet away from the inn. A man in a cowboy hat and a thick wool coat held the reins, clicking his teeth for the gray and white splotched horse to slow. That's not something you see every day, she muttered, falling in love with the scenery all over again. Hoping to recapture the relief she felt before the phone call, Grace attempted to wheel her suitcase toward Harper's Inn. Drag her suitcase. She ended up carrying it the old-fashioned way, up the stairs, along the shoveled sidewalk, and to the entrance, a white door on the top. A louder wail her back. She was young, close to Welcome to Harper's Inn. Grace placed her pile covered in a square of space where a coat rack stood on the tray of to hear. Do you have a reservation? I'm afraid we're full. Grace showed more slowly. He heard the there had been an opening where she'd gone online. line to get a reservation. Yes, under Grace Eastland. The woman scanned her device on its dock, pausing with a pleased grin. There you are. Welcome. I'm Juniper Harper. My parents own this place, and I go by Junie, since the double purrs and the name sound weird. Grace laughed. She liked this woman already. Hi, Junie. You live here, then? I do, and I love it. I can't say I blame you for that. Grace glanced down the narrow hall leading past the welcome desk, catching sight of a dining area at its end. You're all checked in, Grace, Junie said, plucking a set of keys from a hook on the wall behind her. Here are your keys. You're upstairs in room 11. That's my lucky number, Grace said. Lucky you got that room, then, Junie grinned. I'm sure I'll see you around. Thanks. Grace took the keys, but she wasn't quite ready to head upstairs just yet. She wanted to soak in the surroundings down here for a little longer. Maybe it was the writer in her, but she loved details. She loved the Grace wheeled her suitcase through the entrance, taking advantage of its opening before Mother and daughter exited. She gazed in wonder at the line of white stop. It was quaint, picturesque, and held an otherworldly feel to it. She was instantly mesmerizing scene. Even the details of stone sides were a wonder. A small golden plate. The mom reprimanded her daughter in an exasperated tone, pulling Grace from her reverie. No, Evie, don't touch things we can never replace. I'm just looking, the little girl replied. Curiosity got the better of her, and Grace's attention was drawn to the same thing the little girl referenced. Among a collection of old dishes and floral hand-painted teacups poised on a metal stand, an antique radio stood like a tower on a sea of lace. The young girl fiddled with the radio's two front knobs like she was drawing on an Etch-a-Sketch. Her mom bustled over, curly-haired dog in hand, with the other outstretched. Evie, I said don't touch. The young girl lowered her hand, dark hair tufted out beneath a red beanie. What is it? She asked. At the same moment, a man in a cowboy hat entered the room. Snow gathered into the soles, and a pair of thick gloves stuck out from the pockets of his blue-lined coat. Was it the same thing Grace had seen, driving the snow inside? I think it's old radio, now come on, you should have left 10 minutes ago. That's not just a mini radio. The cowboy removed his hat, giving Grace a little edge between his rugged jaw. She inspected the day's month. Her temperature rose a few notches. It's dawn? The girl raised her brow. How come? The man's expressions were fascinating. Grace examined the legs around the way he moved millions of practical pounds. Grandma turned this place into an inn. He told me this. What story? The Cottage. Rested a hand on the table in front of the radio. Let his knees touch the carpet. The girl kept her gaze plastered to the charmer. Her youthful blue eyes were completely fixated on him. Grace took the girl's cue and pegged her attention to his handsome face, the flicker of delight in his brown eyes, and the mischievous lilt to his lips. 100 years ago, Santa forgot to stop by here Christmas Eve, he said. The girl's mother stroked her dog, opening her mouth as if wanting to interrupt. Clearly, she was conflicted. Probably the same way Grace was, filled with enough nosiness about the radio to let him keep talking. The girl folded her arms. Santa wouldn't forget anyone. Oh, but he did, said the cowboy. My grandpa told me he got no presents that year, and Santa, he just felt awful. Just after Christmas, Santa came by with this radio as a way to make up for the slip. Second by second, stardust fell into the girl's eyes. Her smile spread, revealing perfect tiny teeth, and excitement descended on her, as though an egg filled with sparkles had cracked over her head. Really? This was really Santa's? Really. The cowboy's smile was made of charm. Grace was enthralled by his ability to weave a tale of real ones that was captivating enough to keep 3 women chained to his soul. The wedding nice fairy tale, the mom said at the time, though she didn't sound like it was nice at all. Her cynicism wrung the enchantment of his words. Apparently she wasn't dazzled by his story. Arthur struck behind her eyes. Grace wondered if this was a mom who opted not to indulge in childhood fantasies like Santa Claus and Tooth Fairy. If that was the case, whoever this cowboy was, he just made things a whole lot fun. It's not a fairy tale, the cowboy said. Her lips twitched up a smile, and let me guess, it only plays Christmas carols. Oh no, he rose and faced her, returning the wide right hand to his head. I've never heard a single tune from them, and I've worked here for years. Then why keep it? The little girl asked. Why not? The 3 of them turned to face Grace. Heat flushed her cheeks. Enthralled as she was by him, she never meant to leave their conversation. A flash of irritation crossed the cowboy's expression. It was an abrupt change compared to the easy way he'd interacted with the young girl. She had their attention now. Might as well finish her thought. Grace ignored him and directed her question to the child. If you had a radio that Santa himself brought for you, the girl wrinkled her nose. My mom said we get rid of things we don't use. Her mom's lips bobbed as if wanting to pose another argument, but the cowboy spoke first. Your mom's a wise lady, he said. The mom's face hurted. A batting smile she failed to keep in place. She adjusted the dog in her arms and waved to her daughter. Come on, sweetie. We've taken up too much of this nice man's time. Not at all, the cowboy said. The little girl obviously wanted to continue talking to him, but she dutifully placed her gloved hand in her mother's and walked to the inn's door. She gave the cowboy a final, wistful glance before the bell tinkled their exit. The cowboy bent at the waist, as if engaging the radio in a stare-down. Grace brushed aside the unexpected appreciation of his back pockets, gathered her courage, and wheeled her suitcase to stand beside him. You had that little girl wrapped around your finger, she said. The cowboy straightened and rested a hand on his hip. His eyes eyes were chocolate brown. His proximity had the warm tone of firesides and cuddle blankets, and a lock of dark hair swept across his forehead beneath the brim of his hat. Grace's breath hitched under the full force of his gaze. A sideline profile view had been enough to draw her in, but his shoulders, his tall stance, the effect his features had on her ability to take in a full breath, was more than she anticipated. She legitimately trembled in her boots and had to swallow. I did, didn't I? His expression wasn't nearly as warm as it had been. No smile, and his eyes were guarded. Grace could sense him building an invisible wall between them, as if thinking his distance. Clearly, he wasn't as interested in talking to her as she was to him. Without another word, he tapped the brim of his hat. Grace would never have continued to test her, so obviously not. He just made it clear she could do it. Before he took more than 2 steps, she called him. Okay, still, where did the radio come from? I faced her, and quickly left his eyes. I was telling the truth. Nothing. You don't believe in Santa Claus? I'm Gracie's. No, the same irritation flashed across his eyes earlier. He bit his chin, his body this botched conversation. She gripped her suitcase, prepared to roll past him blindly. Somewhere in the vicinity of the reception desk, Jimmy cleared the man peered, muttered under his breath, and then turned back to Grace. Sorry, he said, offering a hand as though he just remembered what manners were. I'm Boone Harper. If just looking at him had made this much of an impact on her, Grace wasn't sure she'd be able to recover from a little handshake. She had to admit, his appeal lessened slightly after the way he was treating her. Inhaling, she slipped her fingers into his. He had a steady grip, and the calluses on his hands brushing her palms weren't exactly unpleasant. Cowboy indeed. Harper, is that what brings you to Harper's Cottage? Grace gave another attempt at civility. She retrieved her hand before she sustained any burns. I work here, he said. I told you I was telling the truth. My grandpa was Junie's grandma's cousin. He started working here with the horses, and it's become a family trade. Oh, you take care of the horses here? So he was the man she'd seen driving the sleigh toward the barn earlier. That I do. Horse-drawn sleigh rides were one of the prominent features offered in the pamphlet for the inn. Grace had hoped to schedule one. Could be good book research, which was exactly why she was here. Except how lame would that make her? To request a solo ride in a sleigh? She had no one to sidle up in that sleigh with. Not that having a date was a requirement. Still, it would make her singleness more than obvious. Then again, that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. A couple shuffled past her. She inched forward to avoid collision. Closer to the table, inadvertently closer to Boone. He might as well have been another fiver for all that he was seething on. Grace's heart rate kicked up a few notches. When was the last time a man had his time count on her? Never. She had a sudden desire to keep the conversation going. Without really knowing exactly what to say, she cleared her throat. How do you turn it on? Excuse me? Or slammed into her cheeks. The radio! I meant the radio. She gestured clumsily toward the old tower, cursing herself the entire time. Honey, turn it on. Come on. Talk about horrible pickup lines. Boone had mastered the side of his mind. His lips hung on the side. No advantage, just as quickly as he could. The man had a You're welcome to fiddle with it, but the radio never plays. I'm not sure it's even plugged in anymore. Now it's only decoration. Instead of standing there and risking getting swept under the weight of his penetrating gaze, Grace reached for the left knob. She imagined a time long past, a time before television and cell phones, when families would gather to listen to stories being played out on radios, just like this one, to news broadcasts and war updates. Hard to believe this thing is 100 years old, he said, his long fingers accompanying Grace's to turn the other knob. Yeah, she said, not really hearing what he said. She could only focus on his hand and how close it was to hers. Good King Wenceslas. He was unraveling her a thread at a time, and they'd only just met. Well, Boone drew his hand away and tipped his hat toward her. He backed a few steps away, and the space allowed her body to cool instantly. I have to get going, but it was nice to meet you. Bashful in a way she wasn't actually, Grace tucked her arms closer to her body and folded a hair behind her ear. You too, Boone. Boone. Just saying his name added another log to the fire flickering inside her. Her writer's mind drew up the words down. She was never able to separate names of things from what or who they represented. A boon was something that was helpful or a blessing to someone else. If he turned out to be anything like his name, she wasn't sure she could handle it. You have a good day. He strolled toward the reception desk. Grace watched him talk to Junie for several minutes, and then, realizing she was staring, clicked up her suitcase handle and sauntered past the room. Chapter 3. Boone tromped down the snowy steps, eager to get back out to the barn, back out to where horses awaited, and where women stopped trying to interfere in his life. Before he made it halfway down the porch steps, the bell rang behind him, and Junie stepped outside, hugging her arms tight around him. What are you doing, Junie? Turning around to prop up the step above. He wasn't exactly happy with her at the moment. She continued to pester him about being nice to the guests. He hoped whoever the woman in the living room was, Grace. Oh man, Grace. Hadn't heard Junie clear her throat at him. She was his cousin, not his mother. But she was also, technically, his employer. At that moment, he decided to look at things in that way. So he'd been civil. And then he'd walked away at the first opportunity. Giving the guests, especially the female guests, more attention often led them in a direction he had no intention of going. He couldn't count the number of times women had asked Junie for Boone's contact information before leaving the inn. He'd also made it perfectly clear he was done talking to Grace. But she kept right on with her questions. Granted, the idea of a radio belonging to Santa Claus would make anyone question him, but still. She could have asked Junie what she wanted to know, not him. I just got a call from Troy, Junie said. His dad's injured. Boone's gaze flicked in the direction of the barn. That wasn't good. Their other sleigh driver, Troy, sometimes had his dad fill in when they needed him too. That need didn't happen often, but Christmas was coming in 3 more days. How? He was carrying something for his wife into their basement and slipped on the stairs. He's going in for hip surgery this afternoon. Fall down the stairs at his age? Troy's father, Rick, was old enough to be any of their grandfathers. What about his wife? Is she okay? Junie's lower jaw frosty, but she shuffled toward the top step. She's all right. I've offered to go help. Her daughter lives close by. Troy said they'll be okay. Thanks for telling me. I'll be sure to stop by after the surgery. Maybe we can bring them some dinner from the beaches. I thought so too. And Boone? Boone knew what Junie would be getting at. He hurried to ward her off before she could ask. Walk. Junie trundled down the steps toward him. Boone dropped his mouth in mock surprise. What are you doing, Junie? Leaving the reception desk unmanned? Shocking. She slugged him. The reception desk will be fine for a few minutes. Our inn won't. At least not for our annual ride up the mountain, Christmas Eve. Sure, Troy will still be here to drive, but you know one sleigh won't carry all of our guests. Can't you forget your bitterness for 1 year and help me out? Finding a replacement sleigh driver isn't as easy as you think. I would know, Boone grumbled, since I'm the one who will be finding the replacement. Come on, please. All you have to do is drive the guests up to the peak. The bonfire will already be in place. The cocoa stand will be all ready to go. Mom and I will be the ones talking about the event 100 years ago. You won't even have to talk to anyone. Just wait in the sleigh with the horses as your phone comes. I know that's your favorite way to spend your time. As a matter of fact, he had once liked the annual sleigh ride to the mountain peak for a bonfire, and to hear the story of the inn's origins. His mom and Junie's had been close. They'd been the ones to start the tradition of a bonfire with the guests who opted to stay over Christmas. Guests all piled into their bigger sleighs and were carted up the mountainside for a large bonfire. A hot cocoa stand with a set of porta potties was on it. Guests drank cocoa, mingled near the fire's warmth, and then Junie or her mother or both took turns filling the tank on Santa laughter and joy around. Guests returned year after year early. Cool and joined in with the rest of them, laughing and singing carols the guests used to hear during the sleigh. It was wonderful festival. Even the thought of being stabbed in the street, memory what he'd lost when his wife had died, rendered him unable to do much more than exist. Horses are my favorite way of spending my time, he said, forcing a smile. He took too long to reply, and he knew it. Come on, Boone, Junie said, elevating her voice. You know Laura just quit, and Sam is on vacation with her family. I'm so short-staffed, it's not even funny. And now we won't have enough drivers?